Howdy y'all, welcome back to the American series. Last week, Anne Hutchinson was banished, and after a bunch of nonsense, finally allowed to leave Massachusetts. She struck out south for Providence plantations. Her final destination was not Providence, however. It was only a stop on her way to another new colony, Portsmouth. Portsmouth was situated on the large island of Aquidneck, which lies out to the southeast of Providence. But how did this new colony come to be? Well, the idea of Portsmouth was born during those dismal days while Anne was in house prison. Her husband, her friend William Coddington, and several other men. What the? Ugh, not you again. And several other men had held a meeting. Quite obviously, Massachusetts Bay Colony was not a welcoming place to stay any longer, and they decided they must carve out their own settlement instead. Thus, a paper called the Portsmouth Compact was drawn up, and it was signed by all those who wished to join in the venture. Here's a close-up view of it. It's kind of cool. You can actually see William Coddington's signature there on the top. I can't make out about 50% of the other names, though. Anyway, Coddington was chosen as the governor, but the other men called him Judge, because they wanted him to be like those rulers God had appointed in the Old Testament book of Judges. Kinda weird, but I guess it's that Puritan fascination with Hebraic culture. Then they set at once about finding land. Several places were considered, but when Roger Williams got word of what they wanted to do, he suggested that they should buy Aquidneck Island from the Narragansett. And so it was done. Coddington paid the Narragansett chief a very great sum for it, but he was well able to afford the cost, since he was a rather wealthy, successful merchant. By the time Anne arrived in Portsmouth, houses were already being built, and the soggy ground was prepared for planting. A short time later, Portsmouth was joined by her sister town of Newport, which was also judged by Coddington. 1638 was a particularly important year in the history of Christianity in America. It marked the beginning of a new church, founded by Roger himself, a Baptist church. Yeah, it's true, he changed what he called himself yet again. From an Anglican, he had turned a Puritan, then a separatist, and now he was a Baptist. He had decided the baptism by sprinkling that he had received as a baby was not a real baptism. Therefore, he allowed himself to be plunged into the water, the way it is properly done in the scriptures. It's commonly said that this Baptist church Roger began was the first in America, and I used to think this myself, but I've since learned that it's a debated subject. You see, there was another Baptist church founded about this time. This one was begun in that town of Newport I just talked about, by a doctor named John Clark. The debate is whether this church was founded in 1638 or the year thereafter, and then some people argue that the Providence Church wasn't actually founded until 1639. And even more tricky, there's evidence to suggest that John Clark and his congregation were having church services before they even came to Newport. So, I can't really say for sure whether the Providence Church or the Newport Church is the first Baptist church in America. But I must say, even though Roger Williams is often remembered in Baptist history books, he didn't really stay a Baptist forever. He was only a Baptist for a few months, actually, and then he left the church he had begun. It seems he had become somewhat disillusioned with the whole notion of church, perhaps something that some of us can understand. Roger tells us in his writings that he believed after the 12 apostles died, there wasn't any true New Testament church on earth anymore, and that there would never be one until the return of Christ. He believed that there were Christians, of course. He just didn't think there was a church where they assembled. It's a rather peculiar view of things, in my opinion, and I'm not sure that I entirely understand it. In any case, the little Baptist church Roger had begun went on to thrive without him, and he was happy to see it so. This one in the picture here was actually built in 1775 by a future congregation. Before that, they didn't really have a building, but would meet in people's homes. Here's a shot of the inside of the church. Kinda spooky, if you ask me. Maybe it's just the lighting. Anyway, for the next 5 years, Providence was left to flourish in relative peace. Another daughter was born to Roger, Mercy, and at long last 2 sons, Daniel and Joseph. But the happy father wasn't present to hold this last son in his arms. The time of Joseph's birth unfortunately found Roger aboard an England-bound ship. Yep, he was headed for the home country, on a quest for a certain special piece of paper. A quest. An adventure! And what, you might ask, was so special about this paper? Well, it wasn't a treasure map. It was actually a charter, a paper from the English Parliament, or King, that makes a colony officially recognized by them. A charter has all the agreements between that land and the government. For instance, it promises that the government will protect the land and allows the people in the land to make their own laws, and similar such things. Of course, Roger had set up his colony without England's permission from the beginning. He had bought the land from the Indians. England really had no part in it. But nonetheless, Roger had come to see that a charter would be a useful thing to have. Massachusetts and Connecticut were constantly trying to take the lands along the borders of his own territory, and he was constantly arguing with them over it. Roger knew that if he had a charter, the other colonies must respect his boundaries, since they would be officially set up by the government of England. He also wanted to use this charter to unite Providence with the new little towns that had arisen on the island of Aquidneck. There was one problem with this. Roger may have wanted to unite the 3 settlements, but not everyone did. And he didn't get their permission before leaving to get the charter. It was a point that was to cause much trouble later, but we'll stick to the adventure for now.